for the things we're going to talk about this evening. We're going to be in Joshua chapter 1. If you want to go ahead and turn your Bibles there, it's going to be our study for this evening. I could not help but think as I was sitting there, I could tell this was going to be a little high on me. And it reminded me when I was at the college church in Searcy. I left here, and Ann and I left here in 1991 and went to Searcy, Arkansas. And that church has the custom that every 7 years they give the preacher a summer sabbatical. And so after my first 7 years, I had a summer sabbatical, and it was just a rich, wonderful experience. And when I came back at the end of that time, they had a new pulpit. And the pulpit was a little higher than this right here. So I came back, and they had a pulpit that hit me about right there. And we were also renovating the auditorium, and when I came back from sabbatical, I found out that they had put me in charge of the color committee. I'm semi-colorblind, and there is no kiss of death in a church quite like being the chairman of the color committee. So there was a pulpit up to here and chairman of the color committee, and I asked them, who is the preacher you have in mind? Because I figured that I was on my way out because of that. I'm so glad to be here tonight. I have always loved this church. When we were at College Side, 1986 to 1991, I had incredible respect for the Sycamore congregation. And one of the things that I just appreciated most about you was how passionate you were about reaching out. And you were looking at all kinds of ways, media, campaigns nationwide. You were looking at ways to reach out, and I was always convicted by that and inspired by that, and I always appreciated you for that. And so it's good for me to be back here now and to be speaking at your Vacation Bible School. Our text this evening is Joshua chapter 1, and the message is this land is our land. First thing I want us to do this evening is to hear the word of the Lord. The older I get, the more I appreciate the significance of just being still and listening to the text. That I have all my life heard people say, oh, we know that story, or we know that text. And there's an assumption there. And I think we oftentimes don't spend the time just hearing the word that we ought to. So tonight, as I start talking about Joshua chapter 1, before I say anything about the text, let's hear the word of the Lord. After the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord said to Joshua the son of Nun, Moses' assistant, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now therefore arise and go over this Jordan, you and all this people, into the land that I am giving to them, to the people of Israel. Every place that the sole of your foot will tread upon, I have given to you, just as I promised to Moses. From the wilderness and this Lebanon as far as the great river, the river Euphrates, all the land of the Hittites to the great sea, toward the going down of the sun, shall be your territory. No man shall be able to stand before you all the days of your life. Just as I was with Moses, so I will be with you. I will not leave you or forsake you. Be strong and courageous, for you shall cause this people to inherit the land that I swore to their fathers to give them. Only be strong and very courageous, being careful to do according to all the law that Moses my servant commanded you. Do not turn from it to the right hand or to the left, that you may have good success wherever you go. This book of the law shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do according to all that is written in it. For then you will make your way prosperous, and then you will have good success. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be frightened. Do not be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. And Joshua commanded the officers of the people, pass through the midst of the camp and command the people, prepare your provisions. For within 3 days you are to pass over this Jordan to go in to take possession of the land that the Lord your God is giving you to possess. And to the Reubenites, the Gadites, and the half-tribe of Manasseh, Joshua said, remember the word that Moses, the servant of the Lord, commanded you, saying, the Lord your God is providing you a place of rest and will give you this land. Your wives, your little ones, and your livestock shall remain in the land that Moses gave you beyond the Jordan. But all the men of valor among you shall pass over armed before your brothers, and shall help them, until the Lord gives rest to your brothers as he has to you. And they also take possession of the land that the Lord your God is giving them. Then you shall return to the land of your possession, and shall possess it, the land that Moses the servant of the Lord gave you beyond the Jordan toward the sunrise. And they answered Joshua, all that you have commanded us we will do, and wherever you send us we will go, just as we obeyed Moses in all things, so we will obey you. Only may the Lord your God be with you, as he was with Moses. Whoever rebels against your commandment and disobeys your words, whatever you command him shall be put to death. Only be strong and courageous. It is an incredible text, and one that has much to teach us this evening. And the first thing as we get going, we see that at the beginning of the chapter, it begins very bluntly with, and the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord. After that death, the Lord said to Joshua, the son of Nun, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now therefore arise, go over this Jordan, you and all this people, into the land that I am giving them to the people of Israel. It is a time of great transition. When we moved to Cookeville back in 1986, I was 28 years old. A little time has passed since then. And this past summer, May the 3rd, I turned 65. So I'm at a very different stage in life, and I feel very differently about life. When I was here as a 28-year-old, most of the people were in front of me. There were a lot of older people out there. There were a lot of people that when you're 28 years old, you can kind of settle back a little bit, and you can think, it's going to be okay because he's here, because she's here. When I went to the college church in Searcy, Arkansas, and I preached there for 14 years, there were a couple of my heroes that were there in the church with me, and there were a couple of my elders. I had 24 elders when I went there. Always joked about I was selected by the 4 and 20 elders. It was like it was straight out of Revelation or something. And but I had 24 elders, and before I stepped out of the pulpit, I had about 40 elders. A couple of those, you know, some of you will know these names. One of my elders was Neil Pryor. And I remember when I came and heard Neil Pryor speak in this auditorium in a summer series long time ago. A Bible teacher, a man with just a photographic memory. He was legendary at Harding for, people would come back 20 years later and he would say, I remember you. You used to sit in that seat over there, and go to sleep in my class. And he remembered your grade back before FERPA kept us from saying things like that out loud. But I mean, he remembered those kinds of things. And it was very, very endearing. But he was the kind of person that if you had an 8 o'clock Bible class, you didn't skip it. Not because of fear of him. You didn't dare want to miss what he had to say. Because as he told the story of God, it was something that just grabbed you. And you thought, this is the most incredible thing. This is why I came here. It was just really, really good stuff. Well, he went on and became the provost at Harding, still taught Bible classes, taught a Bible class, Sunday morning Bible class, auditorium class at the college church for many, many, many years. He was a hero of mine. And because of the kind of person he was and the way that everybody, Neil Pryor, I found out, matter of fact, I found out right here. I found out that my hero was an introvert, and I had no idea. And I talked my way onto the van taking Neil Pryor back to the airport the night that he spoke here. And I had no idea until that night that he was a strong introvert. And I wore myself out trying to get conversation out of that man. And I would ask all kinds of things and he'd give me one-syllable answers. And by the time we got him out of the van and to his hotel in Nashville, I was the most relieved person in Tennessee that night. But you put Neil Pryor in front of 1,000 people, and every single person in that room felt hugged and felt loved and felt that you were special in his eyes. And we all had that feeling about it. Because of that, I rarely ever did a funeral that Neil Pryor did not assist with. So the two of us did all kinds of funerals together. We stood by a lot of gravesides together. And Neil Pryor was just, he was a hero of mine. Neil Pryor was the kind of person that when you could tell it in the congregation. It's like, especially if it was a painful or a tense time or there was uncertainty in the church or something, when Neil Pryor walked in the door, you could sort of hear everybody there go, Neil's here. It's going to be okay. Dr. Gaines was the same sort of person, both at Harding and as an elder at the college church. And he and I did all kinds of funerals together. And when Dr. Gaines walked in the room, you could just hear people go, it's going to be okay. I don't know what ought to happen right now, but they do, and it's going to be okay. Neil Pryor and Cliff Gaines Jr. have passed away. And when they passed away, I got to tell you, it shook me, because I loved being the younger preacher working with those guys. And I loved having them in front of me. And when those tall trees fell, when those two men passed away, I remember feeling a little more vulnerable than I ever had in my whole life, because I thought, whoa, I'm getting dangerously close to being at the front of the line myself. And I know that some people, when I walk in the door, go, it's going to be okay. And the thing that's scary is, you know what happens when you realize that you remember, you're at an age where you realize you remember your parents at that age. Maybe your parents were 28 or something like that, but you're old and you remember them at that age. And when you get to be 28, you think, I remember, being in the back seat of the car and mom and dad had everything under control and life was okay and I was safe because they knew what was going on. And then you get to be 28 and you realize, I don't have a clue what's going on. And I don't have everything under control. And you realize, though, the young ones are coming along and they look at you and mom and dad have got it all under control. For Joshua, it was one thing to be the assistant of Moses. Moses, the man he had followed now for 40 years. And he had been the young protege. And he had been the one that had the energy and the fire. And Moses was the one who had the wisdom and who had the white hair and who had stood before the Lord on Mount Sinai. And the man who was the one that the Lord spoke to as a man speaks to another man, Scripture says. And Moses was Moses. And when Moses walked in the room, Joshua thought, it's going to be okay. Moses is here. What are we supposed to do? Moses will know. What's the next thing? Moses can take care of it. What happens if the people are getting rebellious and they're starting to do all kinds of crazy things? Moses knows how to deal with this because he's seen it before. And he's walked with the Lord a long time. And the Lord has put the mantle of leadership on Moses. And then Moses passes away. And what does that do to Joshua? I was thinking as I was preparing for this, some of you will remember James Murphy at the College Side Church. Was a longtime elder there. He has already retired as an elder at College Side when I came as the preacher there in '86. One of the things, there are a number of things I remember about James Murphy. He was just a great man in so many ways. But one of the things that I've carried in my heart all of these years, James Murphy could not speak of Moses without crying. Whenever he spoke of him, the fact that Moses led Israel all those years but was not allowed to lead them across the river into the promised land, it just broke his heart. And James Murphy would always choke up, and he couldn't talk about Moses because it was a moving story in his life. In Arkansas, there's a cardiologist. It's a man by the name of David Smith who's in palliative care now, and his wife, Linda Smith, is a Bible teacher, and some of the ladies here may have used her curriculum and all before. They have a son that went through college during the time that we were there in Searcy. And I heard the story from the family one day about David Smith comes home from his office as a cardiologist. He comes home from work one day, and his wife is sobbing in the living room. I mean, sobbing in the living room. She can't even catch her breath to tell her husband what is wrong. And of course, the father looks at the son and thinks, what did you do? You've done something to make your mama cry like that. And so he jumps on his son and said, what did you do? And he said, Dad, honest, I didn't do anything. Moses just died again. She was teaching him the Bible. I mean, she really invested herself in the kids, but they had just come across the story of the death of Moses again, and like James Murphy, she cried. She just broke her heart that Moses didn't get to make the journey into the promised land. I say all of this to say this is a huge transition. This is something that's not just big in the life of Joshua. This isn't big in the life of every single Israelite. You have followed Moses as Moses followed the Lord for 40 years. And you had confidence that we knew what to do and how to proceed because Moses was here. And Moses always knew. He was always listening to the Lord, and he was always leading us. He wasn't a perfect man, but he was a good man, and he was a great leader. And then one day, Moses is not there. And you like Joshua. Maybe you got a lot of respect for Joshua. But Joshua's unproven in that capacity. And so something huge is taking place here at the beginning of the book of Joshua. And it begins with that blunt statement, after the death of Moses. And the Lord says to Joshua, verse 2, Moses, my servant, is dead. It's a new day. The leaders that you've depended on all of your life, they're gone. And you know who is the frontline leader? Joshua, it's you. And so I think that's why we find this almost amusing refrain in chapter 1. How many times can you say, don't be afraid? How many times can you say, be strong and courageous? Why is that there? I think it's because Moses is dead. And so as we begin in this, we are in a time of transition. And one last thing to say about that before we move on is that we are always in a time of transition. There's never been a time that wasn't going on. And you and I just become more aware of it, more keenly aware of it at particular points in our life. But the church is always passing on the faith to a new generation. And leaders are handing the mantle of leadership on to a new generation. And it's always going on. And you and I have experienced, and we continue to experience it in our lives. The next thing in verses 2 through 4 is that there is a new chapter to be written. Beginning with verse 2, he says that you and all this people go into the land that I am giving to them, to the people of Israel. Every place that the sole of your foot will tread upon, I have given to you, just as I promised to Moses. From this wilderness and this Lebanon, as far as the great river, the great Euphrates, all the land of the Hittites to the great sea, toward the going down of the sun shall be your territory. This has been promised for a long time. And now they are ready to cross the river, and they are ready to take the promised land. It's promised. It's been promised. For a long time it's been promised. And now you're just about to go there and to live in houses you didn't build and eat from vineyards that you did not plant. It is time now for us to go into the promised land. And over to on the eastern border, it's going to be the Euphrates River. And up north, it's going to be all the way up to Lebanon. And on the western border, it's going to be the Mediterranean. And it's going to be the land of the Hittites. All of these tribes that you're going to go into Canaan and dispossess. These are the borders of what you are about to go and to experience. This is going to be a new day. There is something new to experience. Now again, we're talking about people who haven't been there before. And we haven't experienced this before. And we don't know what it's like to do that yet. And it's a scary thing. We had dear friends, and Ann and I did in Searcy, that we worked with, a husband and wife team that worked in campus ministry. And I remember when she was dying of cancer, her saying one day, she said, you know, all of my adult life, I've known how to glorify God in life, but I don't know how to glorify God in my death. It was a place she had never been before. It was a new frontier. And for all of us, we are constantly walking into new lands and new places that we've not been before, and having to learn to trust God in new situations where we've never been before. There's something that is true of every single one of us, and that is that the only place where there is safety is in our past. The only place that we can be fully confident it's going to end okay is in our past. And the past, when we were living in the past, when we were living the past, when we were coming through it the first time, there was all kinds of uncertainty. I was born in 1957. In school, when I was in grade school, we had the drills where we were ready for an atomic bomb. And so we got under our desk because they were going to save our lives if an atomic bomb was dropped. Craziest thing in the world. And yet the feeling was you have to do something. You have to be prepared in some way. Or I remember going out and sitting along the hallway walls and putting our heads down between our knees. And once again, we were ready for when the big bomb was dropped. Now, I can look back in the 1960s now, and I can be really bold about that. You know, there's nothing to fear in that. Well, that's only because it's in the past, and I know that the bomb didn't get dropped, and the things that we were afraid of didn't happen. But absolutely everybody, present tense, is dealing with a frightening uncertainty of what's going to happen next. That was true of Joshua. It is true of you and me. And when the Lord tells them, okay, we're getting ready, we're going to cross the Jordan, and we're going to go and we're going to take this land, a land where there are people living, a land that has giants in it. We're going to go take this land. That would be like saying the bomb could be dropped. Your life could be snuffed out. We could be overwhelmed. But the Lord says to Joshua says to the people that you're ready now to go into the land that the Lord has promised before, promised through Moses, and now we have this new adventure that we've never imagined before. You know, 3 years ago, we never imagined COVID. I remember hearing about pandemics. I remember hearing about Ann's father, my father-in-law. I remember that his first conscious memory in the world was the pandemic of 1918. And his memory of being in a small town in West Virginia and wagons, plural, coming through town loaded with bodies of people who died. So pandemics have been around before. But 4 years ago, did we imagine living through what we've just lived through with COVID? And it's still hanging around in our world? The future is frightening. It always is. There's an uncertainty there. But the people of God hear the call of God to walk boldly into our future, whatever in the world that's going to be. There is a new chapter ready to be written. There's a new chapter ready to be written by the church. As I said, one of the things that I appreciated most about this church when I was here back in the 80s was that this church was looking for ways to reach out. And that was just a marvelous, beautiful thing. As we go into the future, we've got a new chapter to write. And we need to be bold like they were called to be bold. As a people who don't live trembling because, bad things could happen. Bad things could always happen. But the people of God are to walk into the future with boldness. There's a new chapter waiting to be written. If you are, for the last several years, last 30 years, we lived in Arkansas. And this man is sort of just the icon of the state. Sam Walton, founded Walmart, started with nothing, became the richest man in the world, and just somebody who was this much, much bigger than life person. One of my favorite things about Sam Walton is that at the Walmart headquarters, Bentonville, Arkansas, that before he died, there were no fine cars in the parking lot. You drove a beat up old car because Sam had a beat up old pickup truck. And so if the richest man in the world comes to work in a beat up old pickup truck, you don't drive a Porsche. You don't. And after he died, people started seeing all kinds of fine cars show up and everything. One of the things that amazes me about Sam Walton, he was just brilliant, a brilliant marketing person, brilliant managing person. He was brilliant in a lot of ways. Did you know that Sam Walton never imagined the Walmart Supercenter? He died in 92. He died before there were ever Walmart Supercenters. Who could imagine that you would ever stick a grocery store onto a Walmart and then leave it open 24 hours a day? Sam Walton, that wasn't his vision. Most visionary person of his era, and he never imagined that. He never imagined Walmart online, which is enormous these days. And he never imagined, he never saw some of the things that we did because of COVID, and how now you can, Ann and I sometimes we'll punch in our order from the grocery store, we'll pull up under a sign, we'll text them that we're there, pop open the back of the car, and they load the stuff in. Whoever saw that coming? Sam didn't. There is always a new chapter to be written. And we love to celebrate the things from the past because that's safe, it worked. But there is a new frontier for us always as the people of God. And then that statement that is so central to chapter 1, be strong and courageous. No one shall be able to stand before you, verse 5. All the days of your life, just as I was with Moses, I will be with you. I will not leave you. I will not forsake you. Verse 6, be strong and courageous, for you shall cause this people to inherit the land that I swore to their fathers to give to them. Verse 7, it's almost like a typo, because you think, okay, the person writing the manuscript just simply recopied verse 6. Only be strong and very courageous, being careful to do according to all that the law that Moses my servant commanded you. Don't turn to the right or to the left. Verse 9, have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be frightened. Don't be dismayed. For the Lord your God is with you wherever you will go. And then in verse 18, we find the people themselves saying, only be strong and courageous. When I was working at Ashland Theological Seminary on a degree there, one of the leaders of the program there was a retired Navy chaplain. And one day after a class I'd been in with him, we sat there for like an hour and a half and listened to him tell stories. This was one of those things, it's not going to be on the test. This isn't why we were there. But we listened to a retired Navy chaplain just telling his stories. And we ask about, when did you do the things that the soldiers did, like jump out of an airplane? And his response was, he said, as a chaplain, you're trained to watch their eyes. And when you see their eyes get big, when you see fear in their eyes, you know it's time for you to jump out of a plane, or for you to go and jump in a river, or for you to do whatever it is that is scaring them. And I think Joshua at this point, he's being told by the Lord what is in front. And now Moses is dead, you're the leader, we're ready to cross the river and go fight a war. And I think the Lord saw Joshua's eyes get big. And there is fear. When do we tell people don't be afraid? When do people tell us don't be afraid? Isn't it when they see that we are afraid? And they see that our eyes have gotten big and we're fearful. And that's when the Lord says repeatedly, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Just like I was with Moses, I am with you. Don't be afraid. When I think about this, I'm reminded of the story of Tim and Luke Russert. Tim Russert was a political, he was just a political consultant in national media, and he's most famous. He did a lot of things, but he's most famous for the Bush-Gore election. That night when it became obvious that it's all going to come down to Florida and what happens there. And on a whiteboard, he wrote, Florida, Florida, Florida. And he's remembered about that to this day. So and he passed away in 2008, died very suddenly at the age of 58. The next year, his son, Luke Russert, was asked to write an article for Parade magazine about his dad. Tell us what he was like. Tell us about your dad. Ann's sister up in Ohio sent me a copy of that Parade magazine. She said, I just think this is something that Bruce might find something in. And she was right. Because in that there was a story, one special story about Luke Russert, who was, when he was in college up in Boston, and he had flown down for the weekend to be with his parents in Washington, D.C. And he was with them that weekend. It was stormy that evening as he was getting ready to go back and go to the airport. His dad was taking him to the airport, and on the way to the airport, you've done this before. Luke realized he was being snippy with his dad, and he didn't know how to stop it, and he knew he shouldn't be, but he was short and clipped in all of his answers, and his dad was trying to, what's wrong, what's going on, and his dad was pulling him up to drop him off at the curb so he could catch his plane and go back to Boston. And right before they got to the curb, he finally just blurted out, "Okay, I'm afraid to fly. There it is." And he told his dad about a flight he'd been on just a year or two before, and it had been one of those, if you've flown much, you've been on a flight where it's like that roller coaster. You're coming in after a storm, and it scares you. And you're safe, but you don't feel safe. And because of that, he had developed kind of a phobia of flying. And so he told his dad, I'm scared to fly, and it's a stormy night, I'm afraid to fly. His dad, instead of dropping him off, he turns into the parking lot, parks the car, gets out of the car, walks with his son inside the airport. Being a correspondent, he flew all the time and everything. He had a bazillion Sky Miles. And so he takes his Sky Miles and he goes up to the counter and he buys a ticket he will never use. He's not going to fly that day, but he buys one so that he can get through TSA with his son. So with a ticket in hand, he goes with his son, and they go through TSA, and the whole time, the dad, Tim Russert, is in Luke's ear, and he's talking to him. Most dangerous part of the trip was the car ride to the airport. These pilots are trained for things like this. These planes are built for things like days like this. The pilot's not going to take any chances because he's on the plane too. You don't have a thing to worry about. It's going to be fine. And he's in his ear the whole way through, and they get to the gate and they're boarding the plane. And so he says, "Son, it's time to get on the plane." He said, "Call me when you get there. It's going to be great. I love you. See you later." He gets on the plane, flies there. It was totally uneventful. When he gets there, he calls his dad. And on Father's Day, the year after his dad died, that was the picture that he carried in his heart. And the thing that was so important to him, that meant so much, was that his dad was two words. His dad was with him. He was with him. He walked with him through the airport. He bought a ticket he would never use, walked with him through the airport, talked to him the whole way, was reassuring to him, expressing love, expressing confidence, but most importantly, he was with him. And that's the language that's used in Joshua. Be strong and courageous, for I am, two words, with you. And whatever we're facing in life, that's the message of God to us. And that's the reality of God to us. And that's the promise of God to us. Whatever we're going through, He says to us, be strong and courageous. Don't be afraid. And it's not just, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. It's not that. Be strong and courageous because I am with you. And if there was one thing that we could accomplish tonight in walking through this text, for me it would be that all of us could walk out of here tonight feeling God is with us. He's promised to be with us. And whatever it is that I'm walking out of this building and walking into, I can be strong and I can be courageous because God is with me. Joshua then commands the people. He tells them to get ready. We're getting ready to go across the river. We're getting ready to go into battle. He tells them to prepare yourself. we're going into the land that the Lord your God is giving you to possess. He talks then to the Reubenites, the Gadites, and the half-tribe of Manasseh, that they had gotten their inheritance over on the eastern side of the Jordan River. And they were told, they were warned, now just because we've conquered the kings on the east side of the Jordan River doesn't mean that the war's over for you. You need to settle in your families, leave some people there to protect them, and then the valiant warriors, you need to cross with your brothers and go and fight this war for the next few years before you go back and settle back into your homes. The Lord is providing all of this for you. Don't worry about these things. Then you can return to the land of your possession and possess it, the land that Moses, the servant of God, gave you beyond the Jordan toward the sunrise. So this is Joshua stepping up, and his first commands as a leader, as the general of the army now. He says, okay, first order of business, we're getting ready to go. Y'all remember what you promised God. When God gave you the land, He said, you've got to go and fight on the other side of the river before you go back and settle into your homes. If you don't, it's just anathema to God. And they say, we remember the promise, and we're going to do it. So Joshua makes this statement to them, and then there's they answer Joshua, beginning in verse 16. And they answer Joshua and say, all that you've commanded us we will do, and wherever you send us we will go. Just as we obeyed Moses in all things, so we will obey you. Only may the Lord your God be with you as He was with Moses. Whoever rebels against your commandment and disobeys your words, whatever you command him shall be put to death. Only, the people say, be strong and courageous. We lived for about 1.5 years in Kenya, and there were some really dear friends back in Memphis that gave us some books to read while we were there. And living there and not having cell phones and things like that, if we'd go to the bank, we'd probably be there for 2 hours. And so we'd stand there in a line at the bank and read a novel. One of the novels I remember reading was Taipan by James Clavell, the man that wrote Shogun. Is probably something that more people are familiar with. But there's a story about the novel about this trader from England who in 1842 is there as Hong Kong is being settled. And he's an English trader, and he is called Taipan, which means supreme ruler or supreme leader. And he is over the Noble House Trading Company. And he is just bigger than life. And he's just a phenomenal sort of a person. He's a mess in a lot of ways, but he's a phenomenal, strong sort of a leader. Has a son named Cullum who just hasn't found his spine yet through most of the book. He's a young man, and he's just in his dad's shadow, and he struggles with a lot of things. There's a man by the name of Aristotle Quantz who's an artist. And he's always in debt, and he's always just a problem, and he's always asking for money. High point in the novel comes when there is a typhoon that hits Hong Kong, wipes out all of the houses that are built there in Hong Kong. But an amazing thing that everybody discovered is that all of the ships that were in Hong Kong harbor survived the typhoon. And they realized what an incredible thing this was. Taipan, Dirk Struan, Taipan died in the hurricane. The next day they're trying to figure out who's alive and who is, what are they going to do? How do they pick up the pieces and move on? Taipan, the leader, the one that held everything together, is gone. Cullum, the young son, he just doesn't have the backbone or the strength to know how to take the first step. He's in a daze. He's looking at all the wreckage around him. And this ne'er-do-well by the name of Aristotle Quantz, the artist, he walks by and he says something to him, and he starts to walk away, and then he realizes he's got a job to do. And Aristotle Quantz turns and says to Cullum, Oh, by the way, Taipan, could you loan me 20 bucks? And I remember as I read the book, I almost stood up. And I felt the power of that statement. This man called this quivering, trembling, about to fall on his face leader, he calls him supreme ruler. He calls him Taipan, the name that had been worn by his dad. Taipan, can I borrow some money? And it meant everything. And the clouds just sort of dissipated, and Cullum saw things clearly, and he bowed up, and he began to give commands and to move into the future. I think it was a little bit of a moment like that right here as Joshua speaks to the people, and then the people speak back to Joshua. And when they speak back to him, they say, "Aye, aye, sir." They say, "Yes, sir." And just as God was with Moses, we believe God is with you. And just like we listened to and we obeyed Moses, we're going to listen to and obey you. And then they say, "Be strong and courageous." It's like they've called him Taipan. And I think Joshua, at that moment, I think Joshua stands a little bit taller, and he's ready to walk into an uncertain future. Awful lot for us to learn about God, to learn about ourselves in a very special text that you and I have always known had this constant refrain: don't be afraid. Be strong and courageous. And we can do that because the Lord is with us.